All right, so in this one, I decided to take a little bit of a different angle of approach. Today, we're going to be talking about the Utah Jazz's draft happenings and possibilities over these next 3 seasons, 25, 26, and 2027 specifically. With that being said, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. Thanks for tuning in this video. If you're into the Utah Jazz or you're into NBA basketball at all, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and check out the offhand channel where I throw a lot of the videos that don't seem to be the most interesting over there. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into the nitty gritty. In 2025, things are rather interesting because the Utah Jazz own their own pick, with it being potentially traded away as it is protected 1 through 10. Now, we owe Oklahoma City Thunder the pick if it does end up outside of the top 10, meaning if it falls between 11 and 30 in the draft order, they receive it, which ideally will not happen, is extremely unlikely to happen, but you can't mark out the potential of it occurring, if that makes sense. Slowing the recent, possibilities that have happened in the Utah Jazz fandom, it wouldn't be the craziest thing that we've had to experience, but I would like to highly doubt the possibility of it. With that being said, we have by counting it, our own pick this 2025 draft, which is why we would like to tank as much as possible, number one, in order to keep the pick, and number two, to get the most value out of the pick, as this is one of the more hyped up drafts over the past decade. We also have Minnesota's unprotected 2025 first round pick, and that is from the Rudy Gobert trade, and then Cleveland's unprotected 2025 first round pick from Donovan Mitchell. Now, out of these 3 picks, it's very clear our pick is the most valuable. The other 2 teams are probably going to be picking in the late teens to mid to late 20s. So there's not really going to be a lot of great value for us out of them. Now, if any of those picks end up in the teens, even if it's not late lottery, let's say they're not 14, but they're closer to 18, I think that there still would be a decent number of picks, or rather players available at that point that I think would be interesting to take a swing at. But overall, the Utah Jazz pick is just by far the most worthy, and that's why we need it to, number one, not be converted over for OKC to take it, because they are really our rivals. Because while they are in a championship window now, I would say they have very young players. Chet, extremely young. Shea, being the heart and soul of their team, is still really young. I mean, there's not a lot of old pieces to their roster really at all. I mean, Isaiah Hartenstein looks old, but even he's not old for real. So there's not a world where you would like that pick to, number one, convert to them, and number two, where you would like that pick to be even 8 or 9. You would love for that to be a top 5 pick. That would be fantastic, all things considered, because there is a lot of generational talent in this draft. And even if you want to go as far as to say generational, you could say that there are some very solid, sure hit players. And the fact that I believe that most of the players that are projected to be top 7, will end up being a all-star at least once or twice at some point in their career. And to my personal feelings, that would make you worthy of drafting high enough in the draft. At the same time, looking at the second round, we actually owe our own pick to the Minnesota Timberwolves in the trade that led with Mike Conley. Moving on to the 2026, we have our first round pick. Now, if our pick does not convert this year, we have draft protections picks 1 through 8 via the Derek Favors trade again. So if it ends up being picks 9 through 30, then we will end up having to send it over to OKC, which is not preferred. And while I don't want to be a lottery pick team that ends up in a tank again 2 years in a row, that is potentially possible unless we elect to try and find a way to trade this pick to get more out of it from another standpoint. I think that's potentially possible, but the odds that any protections get dropped or anything like that is highly unlikely, especially when you're Oklahoma City Thunder, who have a treasure trove of draft picks and got away with robbery this offseason by adding Alex Caruso without having to surrender any of that, and really got rid of one of their more problematic pieces in Josh Giddey, who on the playoff stage really wasn't that playable. Whereas they got better both from a defensive standpoint, a shooting standpoint, a toughness standpoint, and then added Isaiah Hartenstein later on in the offseason to shore up that center position and help with rebounding, as Chet was just not there yet and physically isn't sturdy enough to get that job done single-handedly, I would say. Then moving forward, you have the first round pick swap with the Minnesota Timberwolves from the Rudy Gobert trade again, and this time a first round draft swap again with the Cleveland Cavaliers via the Donovan Mitchell trade. Now these are pick swaps, not draft picks themselves, which is important to know because that basically means the more favorable situation is going to be ours. Of course, I would expect us to, want that pick because it's just the most preferable, because both of those teams are going to be in their late teens, 20s, depending on where they are in their development. The Cleveland Cavaliers could take a step back, I think more so because of injuries than because of a lack of talent and because of the bolstering of talent in the East overall. But you also have the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are slightly getting older, but at the same time, they're more established. Anthony Edwards is finding his way. If he improves his playmaking, I could see them making a deeper run into the playoffs to the point where they're in the finals, to be quite honest, because they were, right there, honestly, this year. Except for Luka Doncic and Kyrie doing what they do best, scoring the rock. In the second round, though, Memphis' 2026 second round pick is for us, but protections on it 31 through 42 from the Jared Butler trade. And then we owe Minnesota our second round pick from the Mike Conley trade yet again. So not much news to be had there. Looking at 2027, we have our own 2027 first round pick with no protections or anything on it. No hands tied. It's free. It's all ours. Guaranteed no matter where we are. You also have Minnesota's unprotected 2027 first round pick from the Rudy Gobert trade, Cleveland's unprotected 2027 first round pick from the Donovan Mitchell trade, and the Los Angeles Lakers 2027 first round pick, protections on it from 1 through 4 via the Mike Conley trade. So all in all, I like these draft picks. I like the fact that they're basically all assured and guaranteed to us. I do see a world where obviously, the Lakers pick isn't worth tremendously much. They're probably still going to be a solid roster there. They're not going to hope to take a step back. AD will likely still be there. Obviously, LeBron is nearing the end of his overall NBA tenure, so there's not much to be expected with him. But even, I think 42, 43-year-old LeBron, if he was still in the league, of course, would be serviceable out of a mid-tier NBA player that could give you at least 12 to 15 a night, honestly. And if you expect him not to play terrific defense, he could definitely hang around the league really as much as he wants to until his body just fails him. But I don't think he might still be in the league then. I can't sit there and say that he will lose to Father Time because it's really just LeBron deciding when he doesn't want to play anymore. It's not even about how long his body holds up because he takes tremendous care of it. But Anthony Davis will still be there. If Bronny pans out the way that I expect him to, then he will by default, help things out there. And depending on what other pieces they end up drafting, what other things, if they can get another star over there in the waning years of LeBron's career, then that would also obviously push things forward for them. But Cleveland, again, I think that they'll be falling apart then. I don't think that Cleveland is going to be a perennial winner. I think that they will ultimately end up falling apart over the next 2 to 3 seasons. So that 2027 pick does interest me from them because I think that it might potentially be a lottery pick. And if it was, whether it be because of injury or because they decided to just dismantle the roster, it would not surprise me. Now, would I bank on it? No. But I would definitely bank on that more than I would Minnesota because I think Minnesota has a good few years left. I think they'll last until the 2030s, honestly, because Anthony Edwards is a driving force in and of himself. And yes, Mike Conley is old, but they just drafted a lovely point guard in Rob Dillingham, or rather, they received him in a draft day trade. But I think that he will end up taking up that mantle. And then with the mixing and matching of some other pieces, they could make some very interesting things happen and hang around in that playoff picture. But again, I would still say that our own first round pick would be the most viable unless Cleveland ends up taking a really steep nosedive. And then in the second round, we have us owing our pick to Indiana, via the Rajon Tucker trade, which I actually did not peep until this very moment. But it's actually kind of funny how we have none of our own second round picks for a very significant period of time, though we are bolstered up, obviously, on first round picks. since I kind of covered things a little bit faster than I actually expected us to, looking forward, just to touch base on the 2028 and 2029 drafts, we have our own 2028 first round pick and a first round draft swap with Cleveland via the Donovan Mitchell trade, which is kind of a shoulder shrug. It's cool, not too terrific, just something sweet, What's the appetite? What's the palate? Jazz owe Oklahoma City Thunder our second round pick via the Oni trade, which I may have butchered the first part of his name. But yeah, that was with Oklahoma City. So they will get our second round pick, which isn't too crazy. I'm content with that. It is Oklahoma City. And then in 2029, we have our own 2029 first round pick, Cleveland's unprotected 2029 first round pick, which I think will be very valuable. I think that is going to be one of the more valuable pieces at that point, because I don't think Cleveland is going to be an ascending power. They will be a descending power for certain in my mind at that point. And then we have Minnesota's first round pick protected 1 through 5 via the Rudy Gobert trade. I think we'll definitely still get the Minnesota pick. I don't think that they will be falling off that far. They may be a middle tier team that might end up with a late lottery pick. It might be a 14. It might be anywhere from, if they have a down year, 12 to at best around 22, 24. I could see any window in there, but I definitely think that pick's going to convert, and we're going to definitely receive that one. Obviously, Cleveland's is unprotected, so we're definitely going to get that one. I think that one's going to be a sneaky valuable one. I think we will be better than Cleveland in 2029, so by default, their pick will be more valuable to us because it will likely end up being a better pick. And then in the second round, we actually have our own second round pick, which is, funnily enough, crazy, because that's the first one that we will have of our own since this time of you watching this video. But in any event, the second round picks don't end up amounting to anything crazy to begin with, so I wouldn't be too interested in it, just for the fact that most of them were used in trades already. I like the fact that we have a lot of draft picks. I like the fact that, we were able to get them from powers that are kind of there already, and some of them that are a little bit shaky, because Cleveland, despite being a powerhouse in the Eastern Conference, is a shaky roster to me. I don't love their team. I understand their team and I understand the roster construction, but it's not a terrific enough team to make me say, over the next decade, they're going to be a really strong power. And similarly, I think that Minnesota is going to be a team where they could see some trouble when Rudy Gobert gets a little bit older, because he already has 2 left feet. And contrary to popular opinion, I think Rudy Gobert did deserve all of his DPOYs. I think this last year was his shakiest tenure yet, but I would say that he was aided by the teammates that he had this year specifically. And you could make an argument that maybe Victor Wembanyama should have had it, or maybe you want to go ahead and give it to Anthony Davis or Bam Adebayo, depending on how much you value versatility. But whatever the case may be, he was still elite. He'll be elite for a couple more years. But regardless, Victor Wembanyama is going to be the man to take the cake. And depending on how this man ends up playing out the rest of his career, and honestly heading into the latter half of his 30s, obviously he has a new addition to the family with his lovely lady. So that could end up playing into how long his NBA career actually ends up being, and just how much gas he can afford to put in before those breaks end up coming to a halt. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Which picks do you think are the most interesting, and which ones are you hoping that convert and give us the best placement in the drafts? Also, is there any way that you think that we would end up seeing a trade that would bring in either more draft capital, or do you think that we might sit there and kind of package a couple of these first together to get a higher pick on the draft board? Either way, it's your boy Ray Hoops. Thanks for tuning in this video. If you made it this far, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, become a member, drop a donation, or check out the merch to help support the content. As always, good morning, good evening, and good night. No matter where you're on the globe watching, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.